Welcome back, everyone. In this lesson or in this recording, I'm going to show you a few things to add and subtract negative integers. So these numbers will have a negative sign in front of them, and we need to be really careful. Firstly, we need to be careful about actually making a solid line for the negative sign. So easy to overlook that and get confused. All right, so there's my big tip, and be very careful about what you copy out of the textbook. Look back and make sure that you've copied it correctly onto your page. Okay, don't try to start doing work inside your mind or inside your head. First step, just copy it down, check to make sure that you've got it copied correctly, because you could just make an error just in transcription, and you have to be careful about those things. So what I'm going to show you today is a technique, or like when I see it as a trigger to do something quite specific. But before we start that, what I want to do is just talk about the idea of a double negative. And what I'm going to use is, I'm hoping that everyone enjoys eating ice cream or chocolate. Okay? So the chocolate is in the cupboard, the ice cream is in the fridge. Our freezer, hopefully. When your parents say, do not eat the ice cream, you're given an instruction not to eat that ice cream. And hopefully, resisting all the urges, you will not eat that ice cream or the chocolate. Now, so that's using not, the word not, in a specific context. So a double negative, let's think about this. If you are told, do not eat the chocolate, or do not eat the ice cream, most of us quickly realize that, hey, in a roundabout way, I've been told to do the opposite. Okay? So then I can scoff the chocolate or the ice cream. So that double negative, do not do something, in our minds, we quickly understand, well, I've got a green light on that and away I go. So the skill today will be seeing something very specific. It'll be seeing subtract a negative number. And what we're going to do is the opposite of that. We're actually going to add a positive number. So crazy as that sounds, there's a really simple technique. It involves 2 strokes of the pen. When you've got a negative, subtract a negative, we're going to come back and just put a line in both those negative signs and turn them to positives. And we'll just read it as add that number. So best to stop talking and best to show you a few of these moves on the light board and then get you working. So I'll do that. We'll see you soon. We're just changing the game ever so slightly. We're adding and subtracting negative integers here. So we're kind of doing the same work. And I'm just going to use a little bit of algebra to help out here. Any number, A, we could add a negative number to this. And let's just use B. A plus B. They could be the same number, they could be different numbers. How are we going to write all that? Like, the brackets here don't mean much. So what I want you to get used to, these brackets in particular are just helping you to see that it's a negative number. So what we can actually do is read this as A, any number, plus a negative whatever. That's going to be the same as A subtract B. Whatever those numbers are, who cares? right? So that's easy enough to swap the signs, okay? To make this bit a little bit clearer, removing all the junk, I look at this as just A subtract B, okay? And hopefully that doesn't confuse you and you can do the same thing. Now, any number, subtract a negative B. I've only changed the sign here. The rest of it's the same. But this is what I want to teach you today, is that we're in this situation here where we have, I'm going to write this, subtract a negative. And when I say those words to myself, it's a clear sign that I need to do something. Okay? Some people might just say minus. I hear people say minus, a minus. And they're saying subtract a negative, but they're just using language minus, minus, all right? Same thing. Whenever you say these two things, we need to do something. And believe it or not, the steps are really simple. We're in a double negative situation, like I explained to you here. We've got A subtract any number, subtract a negative, any other number, who cares, right? The steps here are really simple. What we're going to do is actually add the opposite number. So that can be as simple as, I hope the camera picks up the change in colour there, change it with 2 strokes of the pen. I've changed both those negative signs to pluses. So now I read this as A plus B. But to allow me to do that, I must be saying this in my head, or seeing this. Subtract a negative, a minus a minus. I'm changing the signs and adding them together. I'm actually here, I'm adding the opposite. Okay? The opposite. So that's all very algebraic. Let's see how this plays out in with an example here. Why don't we just switch to some numbers? And if I had minus 4 subtract a negative 2, do I need the brackets? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Maybe I just wrote this out as minus 4 subtract a negative 2, like that. I suggest making those signs really obvious, all right? Because what's coming next, when I see this situation where I say subtract a negative or minus minus, I'm going to change that to a plus positive is something I say. Because what am I doing? I'm adding the opposite. So now it's changed the game. I've got minus 4 plus 2. Well, that's going to take me to negative 2. Okay, so let's map this out on the number line. We're at minus 4. I'd go nowhere near 0, so I'm going to put 0 over there. And what have I got? I'm going to put minus 2 in here and see what happens here. So I started here, and if I just looked in here, I would say, oh, that's negative 2, and I'd start heading off that way to negative 6 perhaps, and I'd be wrong. Okay? So subtracting the opposite of negative 2 is the same thing as adding 2. So if I add 2, I must come back and stop here at minus 2. So they're the types of things I've got to think about. And the easiest way to unlock it is this little step in here. 2 strokes of the pen, when you see this, will help you get the answers right. So I'm going to clean the board, and we're going to go through a few more examples just using numbers. The key thing to remember here is when we're in this situation, subtract a negative, we add the opposite. This is the only time that we can do this. And just be really careful about it. Don't get confused and do it at the wrong place at the wrong time. So let's just work with some numbers and see how this plays out. So it's in this situation here where you've got 3 subtract a negative 7. And they're the key words. They're the phrase, if you like, that you need to hear or you need to say to yourself to allow you to do this step. Adding the opposite is as simple as changing those both to plus signs. 2 strokes of the pen, and it's a little bit easier to read. It's 3 plus 7, okay? Because it's on pen on your page, you can't do this, what I'm just about to do here, and remove that other plus sign, because it's already there. So in some ways I read this as 3 plus or add a positive 7, or I just say 3 plus 7 is equal to 10. And just for emphasis, I might say positive 10 and put a plus sign there to indicate that it is positive 10 and make it explicit. That's what we're doing. So the final example that I've got for you is something that you'll see in the textbook. There's a couple of steps in here. So it's set up like this. It's set up as 5 plus a negative 20 with the brackets. Subtract again, here's the brackets again, and subtract a negative 26. That might be the way it's written in the textbook, excuse me. What I would do next would be maybe change this to positive 5. I know some people will think this is unnecessary, but I'm just emphasizing a point. Something's got to happen here. We've got plus a negative 20. Well, somewhere in a previous video we've talked about that this is the same as just subtract 20. So I would write it that way, subtract 20. Now, we've got to be really careful here and here. These brackets, I'm not going to include those. Remember, they're just there to indicate that the 26 is a negative 26. So we've got this situation here where we're adding, in effect, the opposite, which is adding 26. So we can do whatever you need to do next. It's set up for you. One way I've been thinking about this is, as we're going along here, minus 20 plus 20 plus 6. Now, if we start at negative 20 and add 20, we're at 0. So I just put a line through that. Again, these are equal and opposite things. So the net effect of starting at negative 20 and adding 20 is 0. We're at 0 on the number line. So the real action is here, 5 plus 6, and that's equal to 11. And that's what I would encourage you to do. So hopefully that has helped you out there. The key thing to remember is up here. This is like the trigger, if you like, to change the signs. It's the only situation where you can do this, so be really careful. When you say to yourself, subtract a negative, what you need to do is add the opposite.